to go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this episode of Entrepreneurs 11. With me is Miss Ritu Srivastava. She's a serial entrepreneur. She's a founder of Roundglass Obino. She's an angel investor and a public speaker. Hi, Ritu, and welcome to Entrepreneurs 11.
Thank you, Jayesh. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
The pleasure is all mine, and I'm sure in due course the audience will come to appreciate the session. So, without wasting more time, I think we can get into the first segment, which I call gully cricket. So, Ritu, why don't you share with the audience some of your background? I mean, how has your journey been like to this juncture?
Well, I'll kind of give you a quick chronological synopsis. So I'm from Uttar Pradesh actually, but born and brought up in Kerala. My family has been into the bureaucracy for the longest time. My dad's an IAPS officer. He retired as DGP of Kerala. In fact, he's settled there now. And I've done all my schooling and higher education in Kerala. I did my standard MBA and got into a sales job, which I got bored of within the first 3 months. Or I don't know whether it was a combination of boredom or stress, because 6 7 sales calls a day and I was posted in Bombay. It's not really for the faint hearted. I was definitely very faint hearted.
Right.
So I quit that one day, walked into a radio station, gave an audition, became an RJ. Then after about 3 4 years of that, up through the ranks, headed the station in terms of content, then launched another station for the midday group in Delhi, which was one of their more prestigious markets. That did really well. Moved on to the then sunrise sector of telecom. Launched a couple of products for Airtel in that space, which went on to do really well. Got an opportunity to head their brand team at the national level. Launched campaigns like Har Ek Friend Zaruri Hota Hai, which was one of the high points of my advertising career. I did all that, and then I think what really happened was that I got pregnant. Now, Airtel was considered to be a great place to have children because their maternity policies were excellent.
Right.
So, as was inevitable, I planned my pregnancy, had a beautiful little baby girl, and in the process of having my beautiful little baby girl, put on a healthy 20 25 kilos. So I went from a very petite 51 kilos to a nice whopping 75 kilos, which I ate everything that moved. Basically, it had nothing to do with anything else. I would just ate my way through my pregnancy. And I was very happy about it because, I've never really been overweight before. And when you've not been overweight in the past, you
Right.
really don't appreciate the physiological and psychological changes your body undergoes. So I always thought, what's the big deal? I'll lose the weight. But close to about 2 years after my baby, I still hadn't managed to lose any of that weight. And it was starting to really play with my mind. And I turned absolutely psychotic. So it was then that my husband, whom I credit with all of my starts, he basically told me that you've turned into a temperamental psycho. And if you're not able to lose the weight yourself, there is really no harm in asking for help. Either you do it yourself or you admit you can't do it and ask for help. And I think that was a bit of a turning point for me. So I consulted a dietitian who was very popular in the Airtel circles and signed up with her, and she was very draconian in her measures. It was not a democracy. It was what I say goes. And in 3 months with her, I lost around 7 kilos, and that was an eye opener for me, because something that I had been struggling to do for 2.5 years, there were these very simple sets of rules that she implemented,
Right.
and they worked. And but I think what really struck me about that whole process was every time I would ask her, why are you doing this? The answer would be, you want to lose weight, you do what I tell you. And
Right.
at some level, that was the birthplace of Obino, which is my health and weight loss coaching application. Because I said, it's not right. It's my health. I'm the one putting in the
Right.
effort. I'm the one
Correct.
paying the money. And you're not even telling me the truth. You're not being transparent about it. You're basically juicing me for money.
Right.
So that kind of got to me. I left the program and I figured the rest of it out on my own and went on to lose another 12 kilos, I think, in the next 6 7 months.
Mhm.
And that's when I realized that everybody around me was struggling with the same issue.
Same thing. Right.
Post 25 30, everybody is in constant weight loss mode. Nobody is happy with their body. Either it's doctor provided, or it's self provided, or it's peer pressure provided, but you're constantly trying to lose weight. So I said, there is an opportunity here. And was how Obino started. And we're here now, 8 years later. I remember I quit my job at Airtel August 2012, and I sold Obino to strategic investors 5 years later, September 2017. Ah, and here we are. It's been a fun ride.
Hey, that sounds great. And the one thing that I mean, the first statement that comes to my mind is unconventional as far as your graph is concerned. But I think that too is an understatement. So, tell me, was it planned out? Was it deliberate, or you were just following your gut, or how did it come about?
So I have a very simple principle in life which drives my poor family, especially my husband, up the wall. I will do something that strikes my fancy. And when I say strikes my fancy, very loosely strikes my fancy. And then I will do it till I don't want to do it anymore. And that typically happens in 2 to 3 years. By 3 years, I hit my cap of, okay, ab ho gaya, bore ho gaye. And then I will try something else. So it's very stressful on somebody who's watching, because my career graph is just like bouncing.
Right, right,
uh,
right.
but I think what happens for me, and over a period of time, I've come to internalize it. I'm a greenfield person. I like the idea of learning something new. I like getting into something from scratch, creating it. And as long as it's complicated and challenging and stressful and high energy, I love it. The moment it goes into routine maintenance, flatline mode,
Right, right.
I log off mentally. So that's
Fair,
just who I
fair,
am.
fair. And so interestingly, I think this point connects very much with the current generation of, or the current crop of entrepreneurs, because the way, especially we are built, is that 3 years, 4 years down the line, whether it is jobs or in a venture, you either switch out to a different company, sell out to a particular investor or a bigger fish or whatever it is. So, yeah, yeah. But I think the important curve here is that you should have the urge to create something at all points of time. Because if you keep quitting for the sake of quitting it,
Yeah,
may not help it.
that doesn't work. It's
Okay.
not about giving up because it's tough. It's
Right.
actually about giving up on it because now it's too easy.
Right, right.
So
Fair.
it's the
I think
exact
it's
opposite.
very interesting. That's interesting. Okay, so I was also going through your LinkedIn bio as before this episode, and there are so many hats that you don. So I'm sure it is difficult, but what keeps you motivated to keep doing all these things at once?
I get bored. Unless my mind is working 24/7, I
Mm.
just sit in a corner and say, nothing's happening. I'm not doing
Right.
enough. I don't know why. I think this has been a recurring theme in my life. For me, it's my mental image is that of an hourglass with the time running out. And it's completely irrational because there is no hourglass, there is no time running out. I just feel that there is so much I can do and
Right.
so much
Right.
I want to try, that wasting any of this time is just it's a waste.
It's a
And I think
disservice to
that,
you.
yeah, and I think what also happens is this. I think it comes a lot from your childhood. So my
Mm.
father was a very motivating figure in my life, and he always believed, completely irrationally again, that I could do anything that I set my mind to. That was the refrain that I heard throughout my childhood, that you do this, you can kill it. And his belief in me, coupled with his probably waiting to see me perform, has turned me into someone who just constantly wants to
Right.
keep doing things. But for me, it's not really very critical to succeed at it. So I'm not. A lot of people ask me this. They're like, you keep doing something else. What if you fail?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter. For me, failure is the inability to try it. Failure
Right.
is not about not getting rich. Failure is not about not making enough money. Failure is just fear. For me, failure is fear. So no fear.
Fair,
So
fair, fair.
that's what keeps me going.
Right. I will touch upon this point at a later stage. For now, we move on to the second segment, which is power play. Please tell us something about Roundglass Obino in the sense that what is the driving force behind it, and how is it shaped currently?
So, Obino, when we started off, was based on my experience of weight loss during pregnancy. So,
Right.
its first avatar was a do it yourself weight loss coach, where we would
Okay.
actually help you lose weight, but completely by yourself. So,
Mm-hmm.
we had calorie counters, tools, automated diet plans, automated fitness plan. The whole model was a self service model.
Okay.
And the feedback that we kept getting from consumers was that I love it, but can I speak to somebody? I
Hmm.
love it, but I have questions. I love this, but how is this personalized to me?
Correct. Correct.
And then I realized that though the broad principles of weight loss and health coaching remain absolutely the same, and if you
Hmm.
follow them,
Hmm.
you will get results, people always feel that personalized is better.
Right.
And it
Right.
does make a difference. It creates a 15-20% differential, but
Mhm.
that feeling urges them to stay with it longer.
Right.
And that's when we introduced the whole coaching, one-to-one coaching model. So
Mhm.
now on Obino, and in fact Obino is almost now collapsed into the larger product ecosystem that has acquired it.
Mhm.
But Obino essentially is a one-on-one coaching model. So you get your own coach, and
Right.
they work with you directly in a high touch, high intensity model to achieve your health goal. So now at the fag end of Obino, when we kind of exited to investors, we were
Mhm.
dealing with over 6 to 7 chronic diseases: diabetes, PCOD, thyroid, non-alcoholic fatty liver, hypertension, heart disease, chemotherapy patients. So we've been dealing with the gamut of health coaching, as well, of course, as our mainstay, which was weight loss.
Okay. Okay. Great. Great. So I have a question which is perhaps more from the social point of view. So, given that there is a conscious development around body positivity and the decreasing focus on external appearance, how do you get the message around, and how do you create your services, and how do you promote them, keeping in mind the sensitivity of this topic, or the nature of this topic?
So, I hate to be politically incorrect here, but though everybody talks about body positivity and no body shaming, the reality of the market,
Right. Right.
unfortunately, is that there is intense body shame.
Mm-hmm.
I am what? I'm currently 55, 56 kilos, which is perfectly acceptable for
Mm-hmm.
my height and weight and age category.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole pressure in my mind today is still to return to an ideal arbitrary weight of 51 kilos. And I work out and I'm careful about what I eat.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much because I know I have a genetic predisposition towards diabetes, which my mom has, but
Right.
because I don't want to be fat. I don't want to have a paunch. I don't want to have love handles. I want to wear the latest fashions and not look odd in them.
Right.
So,
Right.
unfortunately, while we would like to believe that there is a shift towards
Right.
acceptability of all kinds of bodies, there really isn't.
Okay. Okay. And
And the
is
best, yeah, the best marketing messaging even today that
Mhm.
works, which you would have yourself noticed yourself
Right.
gravitating toward, is
Right.
transformations.
Right.
I was 150 kilos, now I'm this.
Before, after.
Before,
Before,
after.
after.
And that's the reality of the market.
Right, right. And perhaps is this something that you see more in India and Indian specific cultures, or do you see this as a global trend? Or
I, in fact, think this is something that has come from the West to us.
oh, okay,
Because culturally, being overweight in India was a good thing.
right, right,
At least in the last couple of
correct,
100 years,
absolutely,
scarcity was not something to be proud of.
right,
Khate pite ghar ki family, and a healthy, well-rounded woman was the pride of her family.
right. It was a
It's
desirable
all
thing.
top,
Absolutely,
yeah, it's all topsy-turvy now because the imagery that we're seeing comes from the West, and we don't look like that. Honestly speaking, no matter how hard we work out, our bodies
right,
won't look like that
right.
because we are genetically different.
Right, and our food is different, our habits are different, our ecosystem is different. That's, I think, a fantastic point, because blindly aping trends and fads from the West or issues from the West without properly adapting it to the Indian context might, in fact, become much more dangerous. Fair, I think. Yeah. So you have actually gone the complete cycle in, as we call it, in the startup segment, right? From founding a startup to get exiting or getting acquired by a board of investors. So how does it feel first, or how did it feel when this particular juncture arrived, and what keeps you going now?
So honestly speaking, at about we'd raised about 3-4 rounds of funding,
Hmm.
and we had hit growth scale, and then we got this offer to get acquired by our strategic investors. They were in fact the people who had invested in us and
Right.
stayed with us for the longest time.
Right.
And they said, we have something larger in mind, something that's bigger and grander, an ecosystem play, and we would like you all to be part of that.
Hmm.
And at that point of time, honestly speaking, the digital health market in India was going to crack. It's very sad to say, but it really was.
Correct.
The digital health market in India was slated to expand and mirror the West, but we are actually 20 years behind the West in
Right.
terms of
Right.
acceptance of digital health initiatives. And the market just did not respond the way founders and investors expected it. There was just no propensity to pay. Adoption was low, engagement was low,
Correct.
repeat subscriptions, retention was horrible.
Hmm.
Basically everywhere digital health businesses were bleeding.
Right.
So at that point of time, given the state of the market where we were in our life cycle, and given the fact that honestly it was my first entrepreneurial experience, and after 5 years I had given it everything. I had given it absolutely every drop of blood that I had left, and I was exhausted. I was just like so close to burning out that this whole offer came as a blessing from the heavens. And the fact that it was a great offer probably had
That's
nothing
very
to do with it. Even if it hadn't been such a great offer, I would have said, "Jane do, le lo." So
right.
I think it was a huge relief at that point of time for me.
Mm.
It was phenomenal as an offer, and I have nothing but the deepest gratitude in my heart for our investors who
Right.
supported us and stayed with us and then gave us an exit.
Mm.
And I wish them all the very best in everything I do. And I was just so happy to hand this baby over to someone else for the next leg.
Right. Right.
Now that I've spent 2 to 3 4 years with them, I now handle product in their investor ecosystem.
Hmm.
Um, Now I am myself contemplating, uh, and now that I've started my investment journey as an angel investor,
Right.
it's a very strange feeling because I look at small young startups in the early stages, and I know what they've gone through. I know how they're thinking, and
Right.
it feels really bizarre to be
Mm.
on the other side of the table for a change. So
Mm.
yeah,
Do
I
you,
really have no idea what next.
do you suddenly feel wiser that you are on this side of the table and you see that, yeah, I have gone through this as well?
I think it's a mixture of horror and the imposter syndrome, because
Right.
when people look up to you for advice and mentorship, you're like, no, 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 I know as little as anybody else.
Right.
And then because you've had that some of that experience, you can see how they're going wrong. So it's
Correct.
horror.
Correct. Correct.
So it's just a very weird combination of, do I say it, do I tell you that you're headed for a big fall, or do
Hmm.
I know what I'm talking about, maybe I shouldn't say it. So
Mm.
it's just very bizarre.
So I was just thinking aloud when you were talking about your angel investor experience. It sounded to me as if a parent is talking. So it's almost as if a parent is saying that हमने भी बचपन में ये किया हुआ है. We've done all this. I know what group study means, and then
हमको
I
पता
don't.
है.
I don't want to say it because then the experience is ruined for you. But then, yeah, yeah, yeah. Sounds right. Sounds
Yeah,
very much like that.
it's very familiar yet scary, yet you know that the exhilaration comes from not just the wins but also the fails, right? Because You can't appreciate a win unless you fail.
Right.
But the
Right.
failure is
Absolutely.
so bad that sometimes it knocks you out of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're not sure कि ये entrepreneur कर पाएगा handle, नहीं कर
Correct.
पाएगा. So,
Correct. Correct. So, Ritu, I was also, when I was going through your profile, you dealt with branding and brand development a lot. So, I also wanted to pick your brain on how entrepreneurs should develop their brand on two aspects or on two fronts. One is the entrepreneur himself or herself, because sometimes the entrepreneur has to be larger or separate at least from the startup.
correct.
And second, from the startup's point of view, because you cannot have a startup succeeding without a visible face of the entrepreneur. So how should entrepreneurs go about it? How did you go about it? What is the game like?
So I think you really put your finger on it, because in the early stages of a business, which are the first 3 years,
Hmm.
till about your series A or so,
Right.
if you ever get to that stage, the entrepreneur is the brand,
Right.
because you start with nothing, right? But an idea. So
Hmm.
all your first sells, which is your first sell to your co-founder, your first sell to your first few employees, your first few sales to your customers, whether they are B2C or B2B, your first coverage, your first investor, your first fundraise, everything is done on the strength of the personality, charisma, and vision of the founder.
Hmm. Hmm.
It is the truth. And anybody who likes to believe otherwise is doing themselves a disservice.
Right.
So I think
Right.
founders don't appreciate how vital they are as a brand,
Correct.
and
Correct.
how deeply scrutinized every aspect of them is by anyone who is looking to buy into the vision, whether
Correct.
as an
Correct.
employee, a customer, or as an investor. After series A, when you really have had some money and the time to build your brand,
Hmm.
is when the product or business starts to take a shape of its own. It starts to take a life of its own. Then there are brand values that you stand for. Then there is a brand experience. There are touch points. There are ambassadors. Every member of your team becomes a brand ambassador because they define the brand experience. So all of that then happens a little later. But the
Right.
first 3 years, the entrepreneur is the brand. And what values you hold will actually continue to shape the brand, because, and I've seen this at such close quarters, that a founder's values will shape the culture of the organization.
Right. Right.
And that will inevitably shape the brand of the organization.
Right.
So it's you essentially. Your company and your culture is always going to be an extension of you.
Right, right. So I want to spend a minute more on this, because I hate it when we get into prescription mode, that ye kar lo, do a post on LinkedIn, do a post on Facebook, etc., etc. But essentially, what I see nowadays is that a lot of entrepreneurs are being active on LinkedIn because it has become more of a norm, right? So
Correct.
it has become something of the thought that one post a day has to be there, right? Or the number of connections has to be there, whether it is on Facebook, LinkedIn, or any other platform. So creating a brand or creating a presence which is meaningful, how maybe one or two things that you can share which entrepreneurs can do for that.
I think it's like you said, it's not about just about the post. See, posts is like a post is a presence. It's a
Correct. It's a
virtual
byproduct.
presence on a social media platforms, right?
Correct.
Um, I think brand is all about experience.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
whether someone has an experience directly with you as a person on a person to person basis, or they experience your digital self or presence online through a social media platform, it's an extension of you, of your
Right.
brand, of your thinking, what you value, what you feel about the world, what your way of looking at the world is. So I think the true true brand building capability of an entrepreneur today is very challenged, because earlier brands for an entrepreneur were built in offline interactions, right? You would go
Right.
to an event, you'd meet six people, and people would experience you. Now
Hmm.
you have the opportunity to scale that presence
Mm-hmm.
many-fold,
Correct.
but it comes with a lot of challenges because the digital medium is not a forgiving medium.
Hmm.
It captures for posterity everything that you
Everything
put
that.
there, amplifies the flaws, and leaves it for everybody to pick over like roadkill.
Right.
So
Right.
it's a very big, it's a boon. Those essays we used to write in school, is this a boon or a bane?
Hmm.
It's
Right.
like that.
Yeah. Right. Right. Fair. Fair enough. I think fair enough. Yeah. I think one last question from this segment. Yeah, I was going through some of your blog posts where
Mhm.
you mention the importance of consistency when it comes to entrepreneurship, leadership within startups, and so on. Uh, you know, what I wanted to ask you was, given that entrepreneurs need to be consistent on a day to day or an hour to hour or a minute to minute or a year to year basis, how should they balance that, keeping in mind that they should be compassionate towards themselves? So, because a lot of entrepreneurs are now looking at the domain knowledge as being obsessed about success, get towards success, keep pushing, keep trying, etc., etc. So, desperation or obsession is being glorified, whereas that may not be the case to a long run approach. So, how do they balance consistency with self compassion?
So I think, like we were discussing before, I think what a lot of people outside the startup ecosystem don't realize, and it's just sheer lack of experience, because we're a young startup ecosystem here in India,
Right. Right.
and most of what people know about startups comes from the media,
Hmm.
and the media only glorifies the wins. It never looks deeply into the process of starting up, and essentially, like a very some very smart entrepreneurs have observed, starting up is a marathon.
Hmm. Hmm.
You can't sprint flat out at the beginning. You have to
Right.
pace yourself, and you have to take care of your nutrition, your fitness, your mind state, your sleep, because all of that plays into your ability to run the long track that's ahead of you. ये लंबा game है.
Correct.
So if you give it everything you've got in the first few months, you'll burn out and die.
Hmm.
When you take into account that an average startup takes between 2 to 3 years to raise its first round, if it ever does,
Correct.
because most of 99% of them die before the first couple of
Right.
years are over. The ones that survive, if they raise between their third to fifth year.
Hmm.
And by the time they get to a Series A, Series B, Series C, they're like 8, 10 years into operation. You realize that the scale of time involved is huge.
Huge. Right. Right.
So the moment you take the scale of time into account, you realize that if I don't slow down and take care of the only resource that is powering the startup, which is me,
Hmm.
then I've killed the golden goose.
Done.
There will be no more golden eggs. So,
Correct, correct. And I think this is one of the major things that especially younger entrepreneurs need to learn. Without the glamour and without the romance involved for entrepreneurship, it is grueling hard work that takes a lot of time and takes a lot out of you as well.
yeah, yeah.
So,
And
yeah.
I think, when people used to see, there were lots of these posts, and when we were in some boot camps,
Hmm.
a lot of the younger entrepreneurs that were with me, because I'm fairly advanced in my life stage. So a lot of the younger entrepreneurs were like 21, 22, 23, 24, techies, engineers. They'd be like, oh, I pulled an all-nighter and I did this. And they would ask me, Ritu, how many hours a day do you work? And I would just like look around and say, 3, 4, maybe 6. And they're like, no, they actually, I think to this day, a
Correct.
lot of
Yeah.
my friends don't believe me. Existing friends set up, people who know that I've existed and sold a business, they're like, it is impossible. You could not have worked 4 to 6 hours a day and done what you've done. And I tell them, I swear to God, I'm not lying. I effectively only worked that much time because I had a little baby at home, right? I had
Right.
a child who was 3 years old when we started. And I don't live in a joint family setup. So I have household help for
Right.
sure.
Right.
But the child is my responsibility.
Of course. Of
So
course.
I could not have worked the kind of hours that you all are working. And honestly, I did not want to.
Want to also.
I was,
Right. Right.
I was very happy with my 6 hours a day.
Right, and I think it starts very early, right? When you see student achievers, those merit toppers and everybody, they get interviews in papers who say that हम 15 घंटे पढ़ रहे थे, हम 18 घंटे पढ़ रहे थे, cable नहीं था, and all of that stuff. It starts on very early, and being the competitive place that we are, we kind of
Yeah.
glorify that later on as well. So yeah.
I always knew I was never going to be a topper because when I was young, I would read these things and say, हमसे तो 4 घंटा भी नहीं पढ़ा जाता, अब तो टॉप नहीं हो सकता, छोड़ दो, ट्राई नहीं करना.
So yeah, I mean, there are things that matter more than marks, is all I can say.
Totally agree with you there.
Right. Fair, fair, fair. So we move on to our third segment, which is called Silly Point. So I'll try to put you on the spot and ask you some 5 to 6 questions, non-general knowledge, non-current affairs,
Thank God.
light-hearted questions. But yeah, so short answers to short questions. Maybe something building on your choices and your personality, right? So, what has been your most harrowing, most difficult experience to date?
Giving birth. It
Yeah,
was horrible.
I was about to say that, but then I thought it's not fair.
No. I think entrepreneurship, starting up, all of that is
Correct,
it's child's play to giving birth and taking care of a child for the first 6 months of your life.
correct,
It's just whoa.
correct. And I was about to say barring childbirth, but then I said, okay, let that,
We let
let
it
it
pass.
go. Right, right, right. Okay, fair, fair, fair. Um, Yeah. So, Ritu the speaker or Ritu the writer? Whom would you prefer?
The speaker. Writing takes a lot of effort. Speaking takes none at all.
Okay. Okay. Fair. Fair. Okay. So, your favorite ad campaign of all time?
I actually really loved the concept behind Har Ek Friend Zaruri Hota Hai. I think
Right.
the way they articulated the thought in such a light-hearted manner,
Hmm.
but such a deep truth,
Right.
such a
Right.
strong insight behind it, and so perfect for the business. That was like my all-time favorite.
Fair. Fair. So, you prefer movies or you prefer OTT like Netflix, Prime, etc.?
I prefer books. I am a hardcore bookworm. Me and my Kindle shall not be separated.
Great. Great. Uh, Lovely to find a fellow bibliophile here. Okay. So, favorite all-time author?
Ooh, I actually have many favorite authors, but I keep returning to the books of Dan Brown because
Ah,
I find this crazy mix of deep, absorbing historical facts told in such a racy thriller-like manner that just the books. I love them.
because the all-time favorite, the Da Vinci Code. I,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
there's another Deception Point. Actually, Da Vinci Code is amazing, but Deception Point has my heart. So it's one of my
Yeah.
favorites.
So I started off. I've read all the the classics and everything, but whenever I want to come back to something, and whenever I'm feeling down to the extent, Da Vinci Code picks me up. So lovely.
Absolutely. I totally hear you. And there's another favorite is Wilbur Smith. So I have
Ah,
all
right,
his books.
right,
So I'm a bit of a ancient Egypt, Greek
correct,
civilizations buff, but not in the academic sense, but more to do
right,
with the whole
right, right.
Indiana Jones feel of it.
Such an alluring thing, right? You can never go wrong with a pyramid. How can you go wrong with a pyramid? Right,
Totally.
right, right. Okay, so what is your one guilty pleasure? Your guilty pleasure that you don't want to, generally don't want to.
Macaroons.
Oh,
I love macaroons.
okay,
And chips. I am
chips.
single handedly capable of finishing this huge pack of chips in one sitting. I would just chomp my way through it. So
Okay.
I'm like,
So with or without air? I mean, Lay's chips or Lay's or general general chips?
Lays, sour cream and onion
Okay.
only.
Okay. Fair enough. Favorite holiday destination?
That's a tough one. Definitely a beach, something with friends. And that's something that includes lots of sleeping, lots of good food,
Okay.
and some time out and reading by the beach. I love
Okay.
that.
Great. 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 Yeah. Any stereotype that you still badly wish to break?
Hmm, I actually never think about stereotypes. I'm so busy doing my own thing that I really don't care what other people think. But this whole, you're a woman and what will people think is just something that I wish people would just get done with already. I
Yeah.
mean, move on in your life. Why are you so obsessed with what that woman is doing? Whoever that woman might be and whatever she might be doing. Just like, go do something of your own. Get
It,
out of her life.
it's like Sharma ji ka beta, no? It's never going to go away.
मतलब और कोई काम ही नहीं है लाइफ में. वो कोई बंदी कुछ तो कर रही होगी, तुमको जरूर अपनी घुसना है उसमें. Just
I can understand, and it gets painful after a point in time. But
and everybody does it like all the time. You can be married, they'll still do it. You have children, they'll still do it. You'll be 50, they'll still be doing it. You're like, "Arey, stop already."
right. Um,
Yeah.
okay, okay, okay. Mm, one person whom, if you meet, you would still be starstruck.
Shah Rukh Khan.
Ah, okay.
I met him once. He came for a shoot of an Airtel ad. And I think
Oh,
I was just standing there in one corner saying, "It's Shah Rukh Khan."
I don't find that surprising. I mean,
There's
people,
something about him.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He has the charm of a king. He has the
I
charm
think
of a king.
literally, Shah Rukh, he is so beautifully named. And he's not good looking, honestly. I've seen him up
Right.
close. And he is way unimpressive looking physically. But the
Mhm.
charisma that surrounds the man, it's like a living presence. It's quite amazing.
Right, right. Okay. If you could change one thing about Indian society in general, what would that be?
I think the drastic toxic effects of patriarchy. It's something that each one of us experiences, whether you're male or female, you have been caught up in its wrap, of what a
Mhm.
man should be and what a woman should be. And this definition is ruining our culture. It's just,
Right.
and it's not just us. It's not that it's restricted only to India. It's just that we are so far behind in the whole curve that the
Mhm.
effects are still so horribly visibly apparent every day that it's depressing.
Right, right, right. Okay, fair. I think we are at the end of this segment, and the answers were definitely rapid. So full marks to you.
I made a lot of silly points, eh?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we come to our last segment called slogovers, where some key takeaways or some important insights for the entrepreneurial community. So I wanted to pick your brain on a couple of important skills or qualities that young entrepreneurs should either have or should cultivate.
I think the first and foremost ability that any entrepreneur, no matter what his age, needs to have is the ability to learn
Hmm.
and the
Hmm.
humility to seek those sources of learning. I think if you have these two things,
Hmm.
nothing in the world can stop you. Even today, just today, I was struggling with some question in my mind where I had so many conflicting viewpoints and I couldn't make sense of it. And I am thankfully connected to Kunal Shah, and he's just such a rock star that
Right.
I I took the privilege and liberty of reaching out to him, and I said, "I'm so sorry, but I really need your help.
Hmm.
This is the question I'm really struggling with. What do you think?"
Hmm.
And he was super kind. He instantly responded and gave me a direction in which to think. I also reached out to 3 4 other people, and
Right.
I got their viewpoints, and now I feel so much calmer and much more sorted in my head.
Right.
I
Right.
think it's really important for us as entrepreneurs to realize and internalize that we know a fraction of what
Right.
it will
Correct.
take to succeed, and we have to learn this. So you have to learn to drive while you've got your hands on the steering wheel,
Mm.
and the only way to do it is ask, learn, watch, observe, research, do whatever is necessary. Do it with full humility, knowing that you don't know and being prepared to learn. And I think
Right.
that is what kills us. Because it's not that the answers are not there. Thousands of people before you have gone before, no matter what your path,
Mm.
and they have done it. Reach out, ask,
Right.
listen, learn, implement, then reach
Right.
out again.
Right, right, right. I think this, I and my co-founder keep talking about this, that one of the beautiful things that I've observed in the short time that I've been an entrepreneur is that the community, if you reach out in the right manner to the right people, is so responsive and so willing to
Yeah,
give out time and advice. It
absolutely.
really reinforces the belief that, you know, that in true sense is mentorship, right? They may be
It is.
expecting at a later stage something in return, but at the first stage it is all about giving advice, sharing the experience, and that's a beautiful phenomenon that happens in our ecosystem.
I totally agree with you.
Right.
And I think if you ask and you are prepared to listen, there is
Right.
no one in the ecosystem who will withhold their knowledge from you. This is a
Right.
very, very giving place, and each one of them has been helped in their journey,
Correct.
and they
Correct.
all want to pay it forward.
Right. Right.
So,
Right.
so ask. You just,
You just
it's so
have to
silly
ask.
sometimes. Yeah, just have to ask. And so many people don't ask. I'm like, why don't you ask? Yeah.
Right. Right. Fair. Um, okay. I think beyond the obvious, gyan that is already there on the internet, what are some of the things that startups are doing wrong or are missing out on when it comes to fundraising or when it comes to getting access to strategic investors?
I think whether or not you're going to get funded is a it's a complex set of factors that comes into play. Who you are, what your experience is, what your startup is about, how big is the market, how many players are already there, how are you placed relative to them. It's a very, very complex set of factors that determine whether or not you will get funded. So
Right.
I don't think anyone can really comment about
Correct. Correct.
whether or not you will get funded. But I think what a lot of people don't do effectively enough, and I was guilty of that very much in my first round, which I hope to kind of avoid in the future,
Mhm.
is that they don't form enough long-term connections and relationships in the startup ecosystem. Because
Right.
I've realized that people who get funded,
Mm-hmm.
funding it's like marriage.
Mm.
Nobody will give you their daughter unless they are assured that the daughter is going to a good home.
Correct. Correct.
So that is the proxy for funding. No
Mm.
investor will put his hard earned LP's money in your company unless he is sure that you come from a good lineage and you're going somewhere good.
Right.
And these kind of things cannot be determined in a single pitch or a single
Correct.
meeting. So this whole elevator pitch fantasy that is going on is rubbish. You have
Right.
to cultivate relationships for years on it
Right. Right.
before that belief can be built up such that people will fund you. And that's what I think we don't do. We
Right.
don't build and farm those relationships well in advance of the time we need.
Right. Elevator pitches are kind of like speed dating. So they are good for short term, but long term foundation is slightly difficult.
They never work
Right.
because the person who comes in also is in a speed dating mode. The person who presents
Right.
also in a speed dating mode. Just it all goes to
Just
hell.
pan out. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. 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 Yeah. So perhaps one area where startups either don't have that kind of understanding or it is itself like a black box is recognizing and understanding competition. So when we talk about pitches or when we talk about pitching, competition plays a very important role, but most of the entrepreneurs end up saying that this is a new product. इसका तो कोई competition ही नहीं है. There is nothing which competes in the
in this
market.
case.
So I think perhaps that's a big mistake. But then, what are the 2-3 things that startups should keep in mind when it comes to competition and understanding competition and recognizing competition?
So I think for me, honestly, the whole competitor research play is geared in the direction of avoiding mistakes. So there's this old saying which says, "Learn caution from the scars of others." You don't have to burn your own hand to figure out that this is a fiery mess that you should not put your hand into. And I think what competitor research does, as its very basic level, is it allows you to learn caution from the scars of others. So you
Right.
map their trajectories, you see what they've done, you learn from their mistakes and make fresh mistakes of your own. Don't make
Right.
the same mistakes.
Same mistakes.
This is
Right.
my dad used to say this really nice thing. He says, those who learn, those who don't pay attention to history will repeat the mistakes of the past. Those who pay attention to history will find new ways to err. So
Correct.
find new ways to err. Don't make those same
Same
mistakes. And
mistakes.
if you look at a market, competitor research will show you that they tried this model failed. They tried this segment failed. They tried this pricing failed. They launched this feature, this did not take off. You've already got a playbook of what not to do. Now you
Right.
build your product around that playbook. And I think the second thing that competitor research teaches you, which very few people understand in the first go, and it takes a lot of time to figure this out, is that the right competitor research will give you a clear idea of whether or not you will get funded. Because the whole investment thesis is behind capturing a disproportionate share of the market for disproportionate returns. If you
Right.
already come to a segment which is not large, already saturated, your chances of capturing a disproportionate share of that market are gone.
Right.
Ergo, you will 99 out of 100 times not get funded.
Right.
Now, all these answers are there on the table for anybody who chooses to look. The problem is that we don't look. And even when we look, we don't know what we are looking for.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I hope to avoid these mistakes next
Right.
time.
Right. Makes sense. Makes sense. Okay. One final question. This has reference to some slightly self-referential. I'll be without being pretentious. So I had written a post about product development and some similarities that are there with kidnapping, right? So yeah. So barring what was written in the article or in the blog post, one or two things that in a sense that about product development that I've written was one about constant engagement with the customer and the consumer. I'm
Correct.
using both these terms separately very consciously. And second is timing. That is timing of the product launch or timing of the feature upgrade, so on and so forth. So if you could share your experience on these two aspects or any other aspect related to product development which entrepreneurs should keep in mind, it would be great.
So I think the point that you've brought up about engagement with the consumer and the customer is a long-standing tenet of the product community globally, right? You have to know
Mm.
your customer.
Correct.
I remember I had a boss in Airtel who was from the FMCG industry,
Mm.
and she was very hardcore about the fact that till you had spent 100 man hours interviewing clients, you should not even be working on brand strategy. She would say,
Mm.
have you done 100 hours of customer study? Why are you even talking to the agency? You don't know anything about the product, right? So it's a long standing view that you
Right.
have to know your customer really well. And I think how it plays out in startups is because you're such a young small team and you're doing everything on your own, right? Your first team was like what, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6
Right.
people.
Right.
You're so close to the consumer initially that you initially grow very rapidly because
Correct.
you're so close, you know exactly what they're thinking, what
Mm.
they're saying, you iterate, you modify. But
Mm.
you will notice as you grow, the founders and the product team get further away from the customer.
Right. Right.
And that is where your growth and your speed to market and your agility starts to suffer. Because now you have to make a conscious effort to be in front of the customer and
Right.
talk to the customer every day. In the first few days, customers were calling me directly. I'd be negotiating the sales. So
Mm.
I knew what price points worked because I knew what I was able to sell at.
Right.
And I would know exactly what they were telling me. But as I got a product manager, then I got a B2C sales team, the layers between me and the customer just
Right.
grew longer and longer. And that is it's a it's an inevitable mistake. I don't know what the answer to that is, unless it is to go down the FMCG route, where everybody, no
Right.
matter whether you're the VP, you still have 100 man hours of contact. Perhaps that's why they came up with that rule.
Right. Right. Yeah. Perhaps a forced rule, or some mandate which could, get. Fair, fair. I think that's about it. Any parting words that you have, Ritu, for the entrepreneurial community at large?
I think I would just urge whoever is thinking of starting up or has started up to remain very clear as to why you started it in the first place.
Mm.
Because often we get so caught up in the craziness that is a startup that we forget why we started up. Like
Right.
for me, starting up was it was about finding a certain flexibility and pace to my life that a corporate career didn't allow me.
Mm. Mm.
And to put it very plainly, I never want to wake up at 7 a.m. in the morning again, ever. I i just don't want to. I don't want to wake up at 6 a.m., get dressed, have breakfast, and leave for office.
Mm.
And I will do anything in my power to make sure that I don't go down that road again, right? And that is, it sounds very stupid, but that's my motivation. Because if I want to sleep till 10 a.m., I will sleep till 10 a.m. If I want to work till 5 a.m., I will work till 5 a.m., but my time, and my time is my own, and I get to decide how I spend it. Similarly, now if for instance, coming back to my original thing, if you decide that your end game and objective is about taking back control over your own life,
Mm-hmm.
it is important to remember why you started up. Because
Mm.
tomorrow you may have an option to sell the business for a lot of money,
Right.
which I got, right?
Right.
And you may then choose to go back to a corporate career because now you've sold your business.
Mm.
But then you're not true to why you started up.
Correct.
And before you knew it, you will be back in that same state of affairs which caused you to start up.
To
So
leave.
just always remain true to the end game,
Mm.
because that's where satisfaction lies.
Correct, correct. Fair. I think that is a wonderful note to end this session on. Thanks, Ritu. Thank you so much for this wonderful experience and wonderful session. It was lovely to have you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jayesh. I've rarely enjoyed chatting more, and I don't know how the hour whizzed past. I'm hoping that it went by equally fast for the people who were watching,
Right.
but it
I'm
was
sure.
such a pleasure.
Yeah, it was such an insightful session. I'm sure we had a lot of learnings from the session. Thanks so much, Ritu. Thank you, everyone
Thank you.
who's watching, and we sign off. 1 minute. So.